Hey NovaFuturians. I'm Nova Speaker, your open-source narrator, here to guide you through this entire read. In this podcast, we're going to talk about ecology. And if you think you already know everything about it, take a few minutes anyway, because we might just surprise you by talking about real ecology. So sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy this moment where we dismantle capitalist thinking with unapologetic pleasure. Strangely enough, ecology is a topic that divides people and sparks wild fantasies we could easily do without. For some, the moment they hear the word environmentalist, they picture two extremes: the mystical hippie hugging trees and living in some utopian bond with Mother Nature, or the rigid activist who automatically rejects every new technology. Let's be honest. Yes, those clichés do exist, and sure, they fit a handful of people who call themselves ecologists. But truth be told, they're a tiny minority, and their philosophy is still worth a lot more than that of people completely devoid of sensitivity. Then there's pragmatic ecology, which is first and foremost about science, engineering, and concrete solutions. That's probably why some of the brightest minds on the planet spend their days rethinking how we produce, how we build, and how we consume. And of course, let's not forget all the everyday people who simply try to live well without trashing their environment. Because let's be clear right now, ecology is not some grim discipline where you give up all your small pleasures in life just to earn some kind of twisted moral badge. And we're not going to dwell on that too long, because it's already been proven over and over that ecology based on punishment leads nowhere. So please, let's come back down to earth, with some joy and good humor. Because at its core, real ecology is simply about building a world where respect for nature and human needs move forward in harmony. That means regenerative agriculture, eco-construction, and renewable energy. The goal every time is the same: improve our quality of life while respecting the balance of nature. It's not some passing fad, and it's not a second-rate ideology either. On the contrary, it's about answering one of the most fundamental questions that concerns everyone. How do we live sustainably and secure our future? So before brushing ecology aside with a wave of the hand, it's worth taking the time to ask what it really means. Let's start, if you don't mind, with a bit of history. Ecology is too often seen as a modern movement that came with the rise of environmental activism in the late 20th century. But in reality, the idea of understanding and protecting ecosystems is thousands of years old. If we go all the way back to antiquity, and even further, we find that ancient civilizations already knew their survival depended on keeping a balanced relationship with nature. For centuries, long before the word sustainability ever entered the spotlight, indigenous peoples had developed farming methods that respected ecosystems. Take crop rotation, for example. It was common practice from Mesopotamia all the way to medieval Europe. That was one of the first ecological practices based on pure common sense. And in China, traditions like feng shui weren't just about aesthetics. They were used to align houses and villages in harmony with natural elements. Fast forward to the 19th century, and ecology became a full-fledged scientific discipline. The German biologist Ernst Haeckel coined the term in 1866, defining it as the study of organisms and their relationships with the environment. Later, as industrialization sped up, great scientists like Alexander von Humboldt and later Rachel Carson sounded the alarm on the dangers of exploiting nature without recognizing its limits. From these examples, it's clear that ecology is not just some knee-jerk reaction to modern environmental problems. The real question isn't whether ecology matters. The real question is, why, despite everything we consciously or unconsciously know about it, do we still keep minimizing this science? Now let's look at the word itself, because words shape how we see the world. And ecology is no exception. Its roots come from the ancient Greek oikos, meaning house or habitat, and logos, meaning study or discourse. Put together, it literally means the science of our home. And that home is not just a forest, a river, or a piece of farmland. It's the entire planet. Once you see the earth as our home, your relationship with the environment changes. Because for most of us, our home is something we take care of. We fix it up, we maintain it, so future generations can live there comfortably. And yet, unlike our personal homes, we often treat our shared home with shocking neglect. Not because people are naturally reckless, but because disastrous policies push us toward endless exploitation, pollution, and overconsumption. As if the walls of this house could never collapse, as if its foundations would hold forever. If we want to break free from that downward spiral, we need to understand that ecology isn't just about protecting nature, flowers, or birds. Much more than that. It's about understanding the entire system that keeps us alive. Which means before every action we take, we have to ask ourselves, what impact will this have on the balance of the house we all share? And that applies to every sector: agriculture, industry, urban planning. But sadly, that's not how things are going right now. So the real question becomes, how much longer can we afford to ignore ecology as a global way of managing our world? Which brings us straight to a political framework called ecological economics. Unfortunately, it's a serious alternative that most people have never even heard of. Yet in the academic world, ecological economics is far from fringe. And it's a real shame that the TV pundits, those economists on the payroll of financial power who flood the airwaves with their biased analyses, never seem to talk about it. But let's be nice for a moment and pretend we don't know why. So here's the point. Ecological economics is an economic field that fully accounts for the physical limits of our planet. Unlike traditional economic models built on the fantasy of infinite growth, ecological economics recognizes that resources are finite and that a sustainable system must operate within those limits. So once again, let me ask, why is this perfectly logical concept almost never mentioned in the media? The answer is pretty straightforward. A sustainable and functional economy doesn't serve the interests of those in power. The current system survives only on short-term profit, endless consumption, and resource depletion. Switching to a model built on balance instead of exploitation would shake the very foundations of today's economic and political power. And if we're stuck suffering under this nihilistic system, it's only because instead of opening a real debate, mainstream media keeps distracting the public. They constantly play the card of emotion, never substance. So instead of getting solid information about how to scientifically build an economy that actually works for the planet, we get flooded with celebrity gossip and staged political scandals. But really, what else can we expect from propaganda machines that make most of their money by pushing us to consume more through advertising? The question answers itself. Anyway, let's dive into the make some friends in the swamp of green politics section. And I won't beat around the bush. Green politics is an absolute train wreck. Let's face it, this messy, divided movement has often done more harm than good by failing to focus on the real environmental challenges. Instead, it's bogged down in ideological battles that divide instead of unite. And rather than building solid, pragmatic solutions, this political crowd, just as corrupt as any other, has managed to turn off a huge number of voters. The result? Electoral disasters, plain and simple. So why the fiasco? Maybe because people who genuinely care about protecting the environment see right through the contradictions and empty speeches. And maybe they also know that promoting ecology has to be based on facts, science, and action, not political theater. And that's that. Hopefully the message is heard loud and clear by those imposters who drag down a noble cause for their own personal gain. Now let's look at the different forms of ecology. Over time, several ideological currents have popped up, each with its own flaws and contradictions. And no, they're not all created equal. So let's untangle this mess. First, there's the soft ecology, the one that slips neatly into capitalism, painting everything green while keeping the status quo intact. It's the version that reassures big industries by pretending a few tweaks here and there will magically fix a system that's already collapsing. On the opposite side, there's radical ecology, which often comes with a rigid, almost dogmatic mindset. Instead of trying to persuade, it tries to impose change by force, pushing away people who might otherwise be open to listening. And then there's the third way, the only truly credible one. An approach to ecology that's smart, solution-driven, and grounded in reality. This vision recognizes the world's complexity, leans on scientific progress, and focuses on achievable goals that move us beyond the current system. The method is simple. Instead of forcing an ideology down people's throats, it builds bridges. Instead of shouting into the void, it proves through action that another world is possible. In the end, it's an ecology that doesn't just criticize capitalism, it acts against it to build a better model. Now let's move on to the economic side of things. And honestly, the economists who blindly follow the little handbook of perfect capitalism could learn a thing or two here, because it's ecology that creates real wealth, not outdated systems built on the law of the jungle. The champions of profit at all costs love to tell us that ecology is a burden on the economy. But nothing could be further from the truth. It's painfully obvious that a healthy planet is the very foundation of all wealth. Just look at how many billions get spent every year on natural disasters triggered by climate change. And who's directly responsible for that? You guessed it, the catastrophic mismanagement of the world by the capitalist system. We need to stop getting fooled by the empty rhetoric of Wall Street-style market economics. Because at the end of the day, clean air, fertile soil, a stable climate, and abundant natural resources are the real pillars of prosperity. Without them, no economic system can function. Protecting the environment is not a sacrifice. On the contrary, it's a heavyweight investment in our future, one that allows societies to thrive instead of collapsing under the weight of resource exhaustion and environmental chaos. And to convince the last skeptics out there, ecology isn't about slowing down progress. It's about redefining progress to actually work in our favor. After all that, if what I've laid out makes sense to you, you're probably asking yourself the next question. How do we act, since it's painfully clear that governments and organizations keep failing to enforce any system that respects both life and the environment? The answer is simple. Stop scattering our efforts and focus on a model that most people can actually accept. For example, a model built on the common good instead of endless competition. That would be a pretty solid starting point, don't you think? But here's the thing. You have to understand from the start that real change won't come from governments magically waking up one morning. And don't expect much from the big environmental NGOs either, because they're mostly just running a business off gullible people. Let's be real. Trying to change the system from the inside is pure fantasy. The rules are rigged, and it's never going to work. So don't waste your time, your energy, or your money chasing dead ends. A positive future can only come from people taking back control of their destiny by making conscious choices for tomorrow. That means building real alternatives where every step toward ecology and autonomy weakens the forces that thrive on destruction. And to get real results, the best strategy is to organize into local collectives, informal if possible, to give your opponents as little leverage as you can. That way, you're no longer alone in the face of adversity. Because let's be honest, the challenges our planet faces are way too big for any one person, or even small groups, to handle alone. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. It just means we have to come together and move in the same direction, shifting from passive spectators of a collapsing system to active builders of a new world. Because let's be clear, this paradigm shift isn't going to happen in air-conditioned boardrooms or during flashy election rallies. So don't waste your time on distractions. Act on the ground, using real alternatives with a spirit of kindness and solidarity. Based on everything we've said, here's the winning strategy if you want things to finally move in the right direction. Start by joining or creating a local collective, and make sure it connects with other groups. By working in a fully decentralized way, the forces that oppress us and destroy our environment will have no grip on you. And if you get that, then you've already grasped the core of modern guerrilla tactics, the kind that actually deliver results. But before you put on your Subcommandant Marcos outfit, here's one piece of advice. If you really want your actions to succeed, always remember, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And truth always wins over lies when it's explained clearly. With that said, here's what we can offer you on our side. Join the NovaFuture forums. There, you'll find tools to organize, and you'll be able to connect with people who share your values. And why NovaFuture instead of anywhere else? Great question. Thanks for asking. The answer is simple. You're not going to thrive on billionaire-owned platforms, the very same people responsible for most of our problems. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, they're all controlled entirely by the enemies of our cause. So what do you really expect from them, other than being manipulated and wasting your precious attention span? If you've got the right answer, come tell us on the NovaFuture forum. In the meantime, before we meet again on the free internet, let me just say this. Producing this podcast took many hours of hard work. So if you could spare 20 seconds to buy us a coffee on Buy Me a Coffee, it would mean a lot. It genuinely helps us keep the site moving forward and support our real-world actions. Either way, thanks for listening, and see you soon for new adventures.